Okay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Ordinary Council meeting being held on Tuesday, the 18th of April. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Kaurna people as the traditional custodians of the land. City of Prospect acknowledges that we are on the traditional country of the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains region, and we pay our respect to elders past, present and emerging. We recognise and respect their cultural heritage, beliefs and relationships with the land, and we acknowledge that they are of continuing importance to the Kaurna people living today. I'd now like to read the Council Pledge. We seek wisdom and understanding as we face the duties of our united task, praying for the peace and prosperity of our city. Okay. Item number 2 on the agenda, on leave, nil. Apologies, we have apologies from Councillor Christina Barnett, the Mark Group, and Councillor Twin Win. Item 4 on the agenda, declaration of members of a conflict of interest of Councillor Nelson for items 8.1 and 8.2. Also Councillor Nelson for item 10.1. Are there any other conflict of interest people would like to declare? Excellent. Moving on to item 5 on the agenda, confirmation of minutes, recommendations there. Do I have a mover? Councillor Standen, would I like to speak to the motion?
I don't think I need to, thank you.
Okay. Do I have a seconder? So Councillor Nelson's hand up first. Councillor Nelson, would you like to speak to the motion? Is there any further discussion? Otherwise, we'll move to summing up. Councillor Standen,
I'm good,
what an
thank you.
opportunity. Okay, all those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 6 on the agenda, public question time. So just to go through public question time, we're allowing a maximum period of 15 minutes in total, a maximum time of 3 minutes per person, and the presiding member, which is me, may allow for extension of time if appropriate. So with that having been said, are there any where are we here? Are there any questions from members of the public?
Yes.
Would you like to come forward and
Yeah.
for the purposes of the minutes, your name and your address, please? And I'm
Certainly. Grace Fitzpatrick, 28 Newborn Street, Nailsworth. And I've got three questions.
just going to let you know that I'm starting the
I
clock.
know you are.
Ready?
Yeah. Okay,
Go. 3 minutes, Grace.
okay. Given the imminent demolition of the hall, the Rosary Hall, will the council review its policies and procedures to ensure council's commitment to preserving our heritage is reflected in the advice provided by staff to the independent CAP? That's my first question. My second one I'll move
Might
on
just-
to. Given
I
the,
can-
yeah, you give me 3 minutes.
I'm going to pause.
Okay,
CEO. Through you, any,
and then you might want to start your timer again.
I was planning on doing that.
Very good.
So the question is, will we review our procedures
Mhm.
on reporting to the CAP, staff reports to the CAP?
It's not just that, it's the fact that your policies and your procedures in regards to heritage and preserving art is reflected by the advice provided and the recommendations by the city council staff to the independent CAP.
Is that still the same question?
I just elaborated for you in case you didn't understand it.
So again, I'm trying to understand your question because I'm,
The question is simply, out of everything that is ensued in regards to Rosary Church and the fact there's been a lot of confusion regarding what the application should have been, whether it be local heritage or whether to state heritage, that to me, there's a glaring concern about the processes and
Sorry, so
procedures.
the question,
The question really is, in light of what's ensued at Rosary Hall and to ensure it doesn't happen to another building in Prospect, my question is, will council review their policies in regards to heritage listing local and state? And that advice and recommendations regarding developments goes to the CAP, so they make their decisions on the recommendations from staff. We know it's an independent CAP, but
Sorry,
there
so-
are council recommendations and there's
I
concerns.
think we've got the question, so
Yeah,
so,
I'll throw to the CEO.
so Mr. McCluskey, I might ask you to address this. So I believe the question alludes to a suggestion that our current policies and procedures as pertain to staff reporting professional advice to the CAP in relation to heritage matters is insufficient. Could you respond to that?
Through the chair, I guess I need to separate council policies from the planning policies of the planning and design code. So certainly the council may well have policy matters or procedures in relation to heritage items, but the reports from my staff are independent CAP will deal with planning policies of the code against which the CAP must assess developments.
we get that. I sat on a deck, but I was a former councillor, so I really understand that. But my issue is
Sorry,
in
Grace, I just,
regards to the confusion
Grace.
between the listing of local heritage.
sorry,
and
can I, I'm
state.
just going to have to stop you there.
So
So,
maybe it's council policies
So have-
and we should leave the CAP out of it.
well, you've asked a question.
Yeah.
And we've given an answer.
All right,
So can I move on to reset and to your next question?
yeah,
Over to you.
okay. We'll move to that, but I'll follow up further regarding this. Now, given the decision of the CAP to demolish the hall has highlighted a lack of heritage expertise on the CAP itself, what assurances can council give that new members of the CAP have heritage expertise? What I'm highlighting here is there's a lot of confusion. People came to council for advice on the hall. And now with everything that ensued and with advice from the planning minister himself, what is becoming apparent is there should have been a process of going down, looking at a single local heritage. And this is why I'm raising this, because it directly affects if council's policies themselves are unclear. It's directly affecting the advice you're actually given regarding the CAP. And it also, if the CAP itself, I sat in that CAP meeting, didn't direct to say needed a local
Sorry.
heritage,
Um,
there's confusion. That's
So
what I'm
it-
trying to highlight.
okay, so just going back to the question again.
Mm.
I believe the question was, that
Expertise of heritage,
heritage expertise on the
the
CAP.
cap itself.
So I can answer that by saying, the CAP membership has recently been reviewed. In fact, was it yesterday was the first meeting of the new CAP? The new CAP membership is public information as far as I'm aware. The expertise of those members should be easy to look up in terms of their professional resumes and the like. Mr. McCluskey, can you offer any insight into whether or not we've been able to secure any heritage expertise as part of the new panel?
So through the chair, one of the new appointments to the panel is an architect by background. Her principal work is not in heritage architecture. She has done some work in that area.
Which is more than we had in the past. And I think, again, we are limited, Mr. McCluskey, are we not, to considering the applicants who actually submit in relation to the expression of interest and are on the board approved list. Is that correct? Can you elaborate on the process for CAP appointments and some of the challenges we've had in terms of trying to secure that heritage expertise?
Yeah, certainly. So the current planning system applies all assessment panel members to be level 2 accredited professionals under the planning system. There's a almost 130 people thereabouts in the state that are level 2 accredited professionals, who I believe 2 people on that list whose primary background is in relation to heritage matters. That does certainly limit our ability to.
Skill shortage, we call it. Okay.
So Mr. McCluskey, if I can ask you this, did we do our best as part of that process, and maybe other panel members may be able to elaborate with the mayor's indulgence, whether we did our best to secure under the circumstances the best possible qualified people overall, but including that heritage expertise?
Well, I can say that heritage expertise was one of the matters in the advertisement that indicated they're interested in. I made a personal call to a number of people who I thought may be able to offer expertise in a range of the areas for that advertisement to try and elicit the maximum number of expressions of interest that I could. Thank you, Mr. McCluskey.
So it's a skill shortage.
Okay, so moving on to, thanks for your answer.
Yeah.
Now moving on
Thank
to
you.
question number 3.
Yeah, it's in relation to your item 10.4. Having read the recommendations and understanding that I was at the meeting where council was looking to change their permits and their penalties in regards to developers making bills, and noting the issues that for a number of years that have been experienced by your community and your residents regarding bills and infill in this city, the lack of monitoring, which is a resource thing for council. Now, reading your thing, I have to ask whether council has considered that for removing these permits and now looking at having a bond as being too resource heavy for council to actually go down that path. Have they considered how they're going to mitigate further issues for the community regarding the poor behaviour of builders and developers when they're building in our city? Along with that, you have looked at removing this without, as far as I'm aware, any consultation with the community or residents.
Sorry, is this still a
So,
question?
yeah, it is.
Sounds like it's,
So my question is, how are you going to actually consult with the community on this matter? Because it's very hard to do things retrospectively when you haven't.
sorry, that's your 3
Have you
minutes up.
consulted?
So that, we've got
That's my
questions.
big question on that.
So the question is, have we consulted?
With the community, with your residents, with your ratepayers.
So
There you go.
So if I may, enter in there, let me explain the process that council approved in January, because I think it's really important. Your question suggests that we've just eliminated the section 221 process. We're not empowered to do that. Council can't do that. It's a state process.
Yeah, I get it.
Rather, what council have done is empower us as staff under certain circumstances to incentivize developers to behave better. For example, one of the big challenges we had operationally during the construction of the building next door, the Bloom development, was a range of parking related challenges that came from conflicts between subcontractors and contractors working on the site and members of the public and a range of other stakeholders, including staff of this council. It created major issues for businesses and visitors to the Village Heart for many, many months. And part of the challenge we had was trying to incentivize the builder to behave better and to have their contractors park in areas that were not as in high demand? Why should the contractors at that building, working on that building, take up parking for people who might want to attend the library or events in Eliza Hall or
Same thing with civics.
That's
In
right.
your
Sorry,
streets.
Grace, you've asked
Yeah.
a question.
So part of the challenge
Thank you.
that we have encountered in that process is that once you, a developer under section 221 can apply for a permit and that permit is conditioned. It says that you can only work between the hours and you can only occupy this many spaces. But when you're dealing with a public domain and parking spaces, for example, those parking spaces are public. We can't put signs on them saying if you're a subcontractor, you can't park them. There's no legal way for us to do that. But what we can do is with a creative solution, enter into a deed with that developer to say, you know what, if you behave yourself and if you allow, if you require your subcontractors to park a little further away and to not take up that parking spot for, that could be occupied by residents or visitors to the village heart. And if you behave yourself, if you don't create nuisance and noise, if we don't get complaints from residents, we will consider giving you a rebate on some of your fees. That is a way that we can potentially, essentially apply a voluntary process or an incentivised process through the section 221 scheme, but we can't do it under the statutory provisions. The statutory provisions simply say you apply for a permit, you get it with conditions. We can't say if you don't comply, all we can do is expiate you, which is limited. A $2,000 fine to someone building a $20 million development is not effective. However, if they're talking about $6,000 fees per month, we can incentivise that in some way to create better behaviours. That's what the report that council considered in January enabled us to do. It does not enable us to ignore section 221, nor does it apply to the small little permits, someone who is doing some work on their front fence in Olive Street and needs a crossover permit. That will still be dealt with in the normal way. We're talking about bigger developments where we can enter into deeds with the developers that create significant challenges for residents, businesses in a broad area. And it's a brand new process. It's nobody else is doing this. We're trying something new here to try and get a better outcome for the residents of the city of Prospect. The council has supported us trying this out as a trial to give it a go. And if it doesn't work, I have no doubt that your community representatives sitting around this table will call it in and ask us to reconsider that. So, I mean, to the degree consultation you talk about, I think, yeah, let us give this a try, and you can feed back to your elected members if it's not working by all means.
Thank you, CEO, and that's, you've had your 3 minutes, Grace, so
Yeah,
thank
I
you.
might come back with some further questions.
Thank you. Is there any other questions from members of the public? If not, we'll move on to item 7, petitions. There are nil. Deputations, there are 2. Councillor Nelson, you've heard a conflict of interest. I will just wait to you. Okay. Great. Item 8.1, I'd like to ask Anna Graves, representing Friends of Rosary Schools, to Rosary. Says Friends of Rosary School here, but that should be Rosary Hall. Okay, so for the purposes of the minutes, could you please, you listed PO box there? Yeah. Right.
Which is great.
Thank you. Now you have 5 minutes, and I'm going to clock on now. Thank you.
On World Heritage Day, let me begin by saying that I know what Keith Conlon OAM meant when he said it was a visceral reaction that he had when he heard of the loss of the police barracks. The Friends of Rosary Hall are experiencing that feeling tonight, just as we have over the course of this 12-month fight. Since I first heard of the master plan and the plans to demolish the hall, we have ridden a roller coaster. There have been ups and downs. There were highs when we saw the plans and thought that no one could possibly consider the proposed development to be compliant with the planning code. These highs changed to utter despair when the CAP approved the development. The jubilation when we received the advice of Minister Champion turned to devastation when we learned that the school would not stay the demolition and allow for a local heritage assessment to occur. While we feel outrage, devastation, and many other emotions you may see on our faces tonight, while we have not succeeded in our goal, I think that we, the Friends of Rosary Hall, can hold our heads high. We have shown huge restraint. We did not debase ourselves in the face of our opponents. Our integrity remains intact and our community should be proud. Where do we go from here? My original presentation this evening was knocked back because of my gallows humour and that it might be misinterpreted and possibly actionable. I've steered clear of that so far, so I didn't want to start tonight. However, I feel that we cannot leave this fight without suggesting some changes that should be sought if we are to avoid the next Rosary Hall. Firstly, funding for the thematic analysis must be ensured in the budget for this coming financial year and thereafter if this council is serious about heritage. Secondly, council must lobby for reform to the CAP system to include citizen representatives who are not barred from advocating for the city's heritage. 3, demolition approval must be reintroduced. 4, demolition should not occur unless and until all council approvals have been granted. I would ask that elected members and staff of the Prospect Council watch out now for the residents of Staples Court. They will need your support. They will always have mine. I'm in the company of some pretty excellent folk, and I can't name them all, but I will mention Dr. David Kilner, Lizzie Crisp, and Grace Fitzpatrick. I want to thank the elected members who have supported us throughout this sad exercise. It is my hope that we can work together in the future. I would also like to extend my thanks to the member for Adelaide, Lucy Hood, the Shadow Minister for Planning, the Honourable Michelle Lansing, the Federal Member for Adelaide, Steve Georgianis, Denise Schumann, OAM, and Mr. David Bevan of ABC Radio Adelaide, all for giving me a voice further than I can shout. In the absence of divine intervention, this is it, folks. 105 years of heritage will be rubble tomorrow. We truly are on the eve of destruction.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from the elected members for the deputy?
I do have one, maybe just through the chair. I want to say thank you for your deputation, and certainly it's been hard being a deputy cap, and I was a petitioner, so just clearing that. But more generally, there was some correspondence came through in regards to something that came through from the Champion and a discrepancy between noting a solitary item versus the advice that we were given, perhaps to do with the thematic analysis. Has that been, I suppose generally, has that been clarified through council? Not to my knowledge.
Do you want me to use the microphone to respond? Because I'll be flicking this to Mr. McCluskey anyway.
Okay, I'll hand it over to Mr. McCluskey. That's protocol also.
Thank you, and through the chair, I can confirm that the practice direction says that it applies to the listing of a single place. Clearly that doesn't agree with the letters that Minister Champion has sent. I was advised that I will get a response from the State Planning Commission addressing that discrepancy on the 7th of April. I'm yet to see it. As soon as I have received that advice, I will make it available to council.
Can I add to that? I had a meeting with the former mayor and the State Planning Commissioner, at which Mr. McCluskey was present in the middle of last year. And the advice we were provided by the State Planning Commissioner and bureaucrats who are also present on that call was completely contrary to the advice contained in Minister Champion's letter. So the need to clarify this is important. It's something that that staff are pursuing, and it is something we need to pursue, and staff are pursuing it. So there's clearly a discrepancy and an inconsistency between the what we've provided in the past, and certainly the understanding of our staff based on the practice direction and the content of Minister Champion's letter.
Thank you. Any further questions? Okay, thanks very much. Item 8.2, another.
Oh, yes, 8.2, sorry.
I'd like to ask Dr. David Kilner to approach the chair. We have your name and your address for the purposes of minutes. Thank you, David. You've got 5 minutes if you need them.
Yep, sure.
Time starts.
44 California Street, Ellsworth. Thank you for the opportunity here tonight. I had hoped to ask you to set in motion the steps required to protect the Rosary School Hall. Unfortunately, events have overtaken us and it looks like it's too late to do that. At a public meeting last year, I asked the principal of the school if the hall had been independently assessed for its heritage value, and if not, would she arrange such an assessment prior to going ahead with the redevelopment? Her answer to both those questions was no. We understand the architects for the approved redevelopment expressed the view that the school hall meets the criteria for local heritage listing. Now, this is not documented, it's purely what's come to us on the grapevine, so I can't guarantee that it's correct. But we do believe the school could have found a way to redevelop without demolishing the hall. It's too late for Rosary Hall but its demolition illustrates the need to proceed with a review of local heritage listings and methodologies. Prospect Local History Group is not against redevelopment as such, but believes development should be balanced with protection of our heritage. We do understand that the state government set up a Heritage Review Advisory Panel a couple of years ago, which is reported to government. The government is currently considering its recommendations. We have not been made privy to those recommendations. I don't know if local government has. Now, earlier this year, I wrote to the Minister of Planning, and I carbon copied that to you and to other parliamentarians. And I raised two issues. One was in regard to the processes regarding the community assessment panels, which we regard as being severely in need of reform. And the second was in regard to local heritage and how that goes ahead. And the Planning Minister has replied quite comprehensively, as you know. And in his letter, he made it clear he does not believe City of Prospect would need to conduct a full-scale thematic analysis before being able to submit code amendments for local heritage listing. And my understanding was that this applied to both to single listings and to more broadly, but in the light of the clarification you're seeking, we don't know. And I understand you've asked the State Commission for an opinion. Just a little bit of background before I move on. For its development plan amendment proposed in 2015, the City of Prospect submitted a list of 79 additional properties to be added to the local heritage register, and also proposed 5 new historic areas to be added to the then list. I believe these proposals were only accepted in very, very limited form. And the local history group also suggested some additional buildings and a particular tree, which we should be added to the local heritage register. As far as I'm aware, only one of these buildings was added. That was the former Ellsworth Police Station on Main Mill Road. And as I understand it from the former mayor, he had long personal discussions with the then planning minister, and wasn't able to make as much progress as he hoped in regard to this matter. So what do we want now? Well, first of all, we would like council to build on its previous efforts in 2015.
1 minute to go, if you need them.
Which we acknowledge, with a review of the local heritage register, with a view to further protecting Prospect's heritage, since there is clear support for such a process from the planning minister. And also to look at extending historic area statements, which is the current terminology in the planning code, where appropriate. And there are a number of such areas which certainly in 2015 the then council proposed to the planning minister. So that's really the guts of what I want to say. I'd like to see you move forward on these two areas, please.
Thank you, Mr. Kilner. Are there any questions from the member for the deputy?
just wanted to say, thank you, David. There's a lot of technical detail in there, but one of the things that I guess we always look at is the draft budget. And certainly the thematic analysis is looking like it's in the draft budget. Have you got any advice from administration, the cost in regarding a code amendment? Maybe that's something that needs to be clarified, because that's currently not in the draft budget. So, because that's a consultation process, I believe.
I don't know about that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Through the mayor, I'll flick that one to Mr. McCluskey. My expectation is though that would not be a process that would begin until the thematic analysis was complete. So that would be a future budget year item if it were to proceed, Mr. McCluskey.
And through the chair, I can confirm. So council has resolved to go through a series of steps to lodge a code amendment, but at this stage has only considered the first of those in next year's budget around the thematic analysis. And then it would be subsequent budgets that would consider the work in the code amendment. In today's dollars, it's probably in the order of $30,000 to $40,000 of work involved in a full code amendment. But I don't know what escalations will mean for that by the time we're at that point.
Well, Mr. McCluskey, if I can ask you also to clarify that would largely depend on the scale of the exercise flagged by the thematic analysis itself. If there were more properties listed with potential heritage value in the thematic analysis and a broader range of work to do in the code amendment, that would have an impact on the budget and the scale of work required.
Well, certainly that's true. And the deputy quite rightly mentions that there are existing surveys or we've identified places that aren't listed because the previous minister didn't allow that. And that's a natural starting point. But I think a number of people have acknowledged there are gaps in the existing thematic work that's being done that would likely reveal additional places. As well, that thematic analysis that sort of currently exists in parts, there are existing surveys, has a reasonably good sort of chronology through to the 1930s, but doesn't extend far beyond that. So there's a series of work involved in bringing that through to today's date, as well as addressing the gaps and then surveying to find those buildings and places.
I'll say something else.
You have around 40 seconds left, so
I think,
up to 40
with
seconds.
respect to Mr. McCluskey, I don't think we should underestimate the huge amount of work which this council has done over the years to assess and understand its heritage. You know, we had a heritage review in 1989, we had another one in 2010, and then we had this major planning code review in 2015 that reduced, you know, no less than 79 additional properties proposed to be registered. So, you know, we're not starting from scratch, and I don't know what the financial implication of that is, but certainly we're not in a void. We're not, you know, we're not at ground zero. We've already had a structure.
Thank you, Mr. Kilman. Any further questions from elected members? Otherwise, thank you, Mr. Kilman, for your deputation.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to item 9 on the agenda, questions without notice. Are there any questions without notice? Councillor at the back.
I need a microphone.
Just through the chair, just in regards to development, I contacted council on the 18th of February through the election end portal and on the 1st of March and Friday of last week. And it was all around the traffic management planning for the Harrington development. I was aware that work had started and residents hadn't been contacted. Would I be able to have an update either from the CEO or I understand the director is actually not as. Yeah.
So through the chair, I'll ask Mr. Delaney to take that.
Yeah,
Reading there, I would. Council staff have been actively engaged with the Harrington developer since before.
Dan, do you want to come over here?
Sorry. Since August last year. We've been in their hands, obviously, in respect to progression of matters. There's certainly been and certainly put to them. Thank you. support. To them, our requirement to work with them proactively in terms of that construction management approach, and lessons learned from the Bloom Apartments in terms of how we approach that project. It's been progressing with me well. There's obviously the push and pull when it comes to builders and not always being timely in the provision of information. But effectively, there has been ongoing dialogue. There's been discussions with DIT which have held the process up. And that's primarily why we haven't been able to provide a position to yourself, Alison, with Councillor De Backer, with respect to where the development was at from because we hadn't issued an approval yet. To undertake any works on public realm and with respect to traffic management. That's come through late last week. That affected to all the conversations they had with DIT in terms of the access of Hill roads and how that they would be managing their development in a staged manner. So there are a series of measures that will be implemented. We're in the process. We've drafted a letter. That letter will go out tomorrow to the residents of Polesford Road, which is on the corner. The Harrington is located on the corner of Polesford and Prospect Road. Residents and other residents that are impacted by detours that are proposed through various stages of the construction. So there's 3 stages and 3 different levels of impact, and seeking their feedback in terms of what's being proposed. In that proposal is also how we'll address some parking demands in that locality, because there's going to be a conflict that exists with businesses and residents and workers. The CEO talked about the deployment department, and we're trying our best to manage that to the extent that that's possible. I think, as you said, providing information is key. We were reluctant to do that until we had that information, and the letter is being prepared and printed, and will be delivered tomorrow to a number of that local area.
One more question, if I may, I'll make it loud. Yeah, just in regards to comms, I know we've obviously had Bloom and we had Rosemont Hall. Is there a way we're going to get timely information on a website or anything for residents, or is this something that they have to wait for a letter or?
Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, through you. Yeah, so certainly in the letter that's been provided, there is we have set up a web page, or we'll set up go live tomorrow on our web page. Provides information on the Harrington, also provides contact details for the site manager of the Harrington project.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. Thank you for the work today.
Are there any further questions for that notice? That being the case, we'll move on to reports for decision. Item 10.1, the 2023 Community Service Awards on pages 4 to 15 of your agenda. Recommendation on page 5, Councillor Nelson is exiting the building again. Okay, so do we have a mover for this motion? Councillor Nguyen, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, please. Every year I look forward to reading this part of the report. It's so wonderful to hear the different and the wonderful acts of kindness in our community. The recipients, the clubs, the individual recipients, the clubs, all doing, providing voluntary work to help other people in our community. And I think these recipients are very worthy of this award, and I look forward to the presentation night coming up in May. So I hope you all support the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Nguyen. Do I have a second? Councillor Hollock, would you like to speak to the motion?
Pretty much, I have the same sentiments as same.
That's great. Yeah, thanks.
Absolutely.
Any further discussion? Anyone like to raise anything else that we haven't already heard? Councillor Standen.
I'm just, I go through the list and see names that I know. It's heartening to see that we have quite a few this year from over the other side of Maynworth Road. I was a little bit perplexed that Grace Fitzpatrick in her little bio didn't mention that she was a former elected member. Maybe we can actually make a little amendment there. But it's good to see Grace and Alan, who both served on this council so wonderfully, included in the list there.
Thank you, councillor Stan. Any further discussion? With that being the case, councillor Nguyen would like to sum up.
No, thank you.
Okay, let's put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. Okay, item 10.2. East West Draft 2023-24 Annual Plan and Budget on pages 16 to 39 of your agenda. Recommendation on page 16. We'll just wait for councillor Nelson to return. I won't say all that again. Okay, so we're up to item 10.2, recommendations on page 16. Do I have a mover? I'll just say that a bit loud. Councillor Nguyen, would you like to speak to the motion?
I'll move it to get it on the table. Thanks.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Holler, would you like to speak to the motion? Is there any further discussion? Councillor De Backer.
Yeah, look, I've just got a couple of questions because it wasn't quite clear to me. In regards to the $98,000 increase, just through the chair, is that actually an increase to the draft budget we've been discussing in weeks prior? So
I believe that's taken into account in the draft budget.
no, so that's included. So it's basically just a reporting format to say why these things increase. Yeah.
So through the mayor,
Yep.
obviously, we are essentially a major stakeholder in East West. And as essentially an investor in that joint venture project, it is incumbent upon council to consider their annual business plan and budget every year. And of course, it has a direct flow and impact onto our budget, which has been taken into account in drafting the annual business plan.
Yeah, excellent.
Thank you.
So just further to that, just through the chair and to the director, may I say that the workshop that we did last week was excellent. So it was really good, really informative. And I know there's some really keen members of the community already keen to have those discussions to see how it would be best rolled out. Again, just maybe a question through the chair. When does that consultation start on FOGO?
Yeah. Wow.
The intent is to commence FOGO, subject to the budget being adopted, in September. So there'll be an engagement process to roll out in August or July, August. It hasn't been finalised yet. It's in the process of being.
Yeah, no.
And ultimately, there'd be a council report to endorse the proposal as well. At the workshop, there'll be a council report coming to the members with some information to endorse the process.
And probably just one more question, given that it is in the draft budget, is there any supporting information, a bit like the workshop presentation we had, that can go out to the public to consider?
So yeah.
The intent is to bring a report back to council. I have received as of yesterday a final report that takes on board the members' feedback from the workshop, and that will form a basis behind the reports presented to council in next month.
Okay. So I think more what I'm trying to say is we might have a draft budget going out for community consultation. I'm just wondering if the concept of the FOGO can go out with that at the same time, because I think there's a cost.
Ms. Taylor?
Through the mayor, you're correct. We are simply highlighting that through the community engagement agreements for undertaking with the draft budget as one of our key outcomes. We've highlighted and noted that environment practices are actually one of the key projects and themes that the community would like us to focus on. So we wanted to highlight that the FOGO trial would actually be incorporated into that.
Right, so it'll be in some of the comments that's coming to us. Okay,
Yes.
excellent. All right, thank you. So yeah, look, just in principle, I think it's a great initiative, and we can only assume that costs for hard waste will be actually increasing, waste to landfill will be increasing over years to come. So though it's kind of a low, no cost, but obviously the cost of fuel, noting that they've just released a electric, I think, big truck or something, I don't know, recently, one that does the long haul trips. I think, you know, electric is something I'm really interested in the future as well. So I'm very happy to support this.
Any further points of discussion? From the chair, I thought it was a great plan put to us by East Waste. on page 20, there was an excellent graphic which outlines how much opportunity there is for improvement across every aspect of waste collection, which if we can achieve that has financial implications and not just environmental implications. Page 25, the strategies and KPIs I thought were excellent, including and in particular objective 2, which was to maximise source separation. And I also was interested in another point they made regarding household reporting. It didn't elaborate what that meant that I could see, but I'm interested to see how they're going to incorporate that in their future decision making and planning and strategies. I thought it was a great report. Back to you, Councillor Nguyen, to sum up.
I'm really excited about this project. Returning members will remember last term, we did speak about, trying to change the frequency of some of the bins, and it's taken 4 years for this to happen. So I'm really excited, and I can't wait to get the information out to the community so that we can all be on board.
Thank you, Councillor. Sorry, thank you, Councillor Nguyen. Let's put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. Item 10.3, bylaw number 7, amendment bylaw 2023 on pages 40 to 45 of your agenda with recommendations on page 40. Do I have a mover? Councillor Stanner, would you like to speak to the motion?
I'll move it just to get it up on the table for now.
Thank you, Councillor Stanner. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Hollett.
To get it on the table.
As well. Okay, do I have any further discussion? I was going to say, is there anything further to add that hasn't already been said, but nothing's been said, so that would mean the floor's open to anything. Doesn't have to be either. That being the case, Councillor Stannon, would you like to sum up the discussion?
Yeah, seeing as everyone's been forthcoming, can't find the actual page, but I have a couple of questions. The waste management bylaw, and I can't find it on the page here. It talks about there shall be bins at the premises. Is that regarding, just generally, is that regarding the council bins? The council we have to provide council bins, or is there something that the residents have to provide? Can't find the actual page.
Councillor, through the mayor, it may help if you can direct us to this section, and then we can give you firm advice.
Okay, it is the section 10, the amendments waste management bylaw. It says 10.3, the clause ensure that the household waste container be kept on the occupier's premises is approved by the council. So is that suggesting, and without drilling down through the bylaws, is that suggesting that we provide a bin, or is the bin that the residents providing is approved by the council? I'm just a little bit vague on it.
Through the mayor, I might ask Mr. Blaine to cover that. I suspect I know the answer, but Mr. Blaine, can you? I'll have a crack then.
Yeah.
Bins, we can't be picking up bins that aren't paid for by the residents and aren't issued by council. That's a big issue for all councils, that people put out bins that are phantom bins that either resemble council bins or are stolen from other premises. If people use those bins, that is against this bylaw. In other words, you can only use the bins that are issued to your property and paid for by you as part of your rates. That's what that bylaw anticipates. That's my reading of it.
I believe Mr. McCluskey might be able to provide some further information.
Through the chair, I would say precisely the same thing, that the scan for East Waste anticipates that a resident can get an approved bin by council through East Waste, allow them to manage their household waste.
So from what I'm reading, this is just basically a common sense sort of bylaw that says the bin we're picking up is a council bin.
Precisely.
I have one more question, which was basically the dog one, which is the one above that, the number 9. Subject to paragraphs 4 and 5, a person may enter any dog leash off-leash area for the purpose of exercising a dog under the person's control. It doesn't sort of throw us back to anything that exists. What have we got any idea what that is amending?
So through the mayor, I do recall some discussion around this at the last, so I'm gonna have a punt here. What you're talking about, these are normal in terms of amendment related bylaws. You'd have to go back and look at the current bylaw, or at least the bylaw that we submitted originally, to determine exactly what you're amending here. In fact, it is the original bylaw, not the one we amended, because this has only the gender neutral changes that were recommended.
Right.
So this one is essentially, my recollection of this is the current bylaw says you can't have a dog off leash in the city of Prospect. but of course you can in a dog park. So we wanted to add that clear exception to the bylaw to make it clear that if you're in an off-leash dog area, then you can release your dog from the leash, and that's not against the law.
And I'm presuming there was the gender neutral part of the person's control that was from,
Yes.
is that the bit that we're amending there?
Through the chair, the change is to replace his or hers with hers.
Copy that, right. Thank you. That's all my questions and comments.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, that's, yeah.
Thank you for your summary, councillor Stanley. Let's put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against, carried unanimously. Moving on to section, item 10.4, section 221 payment framework, consideration of bond process outlined on pages 46 to 51 of your agenda with recommendations on page 46. There are 2 recommendations. Do I have a mover? Councillor Nelson would like to speak to the motion.
Yeah, just very briefly, I recall having quite an in-depth and lengthy discussion about this at council, and there are a number of options put forward. I think what we've got here is a very good resolve to make sure we can keep builders in line, potentially reduce their building cost and promote them to build faster, so and a lot safer. So highly recommend the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Nelson. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Nguyen, would you like to speak to the motion? Do I have any further discussion, anything else that hasn't been said? Councillor Backer.
Yeah, look, I'd just like to thank, through the chair, the questions earlier that spoke to this a little bit, and so it has changed the way we're doing the major developments, and look, we live in the real world, and we're a very small council, and so we're trying to manage some of these really big developments. You know, like I said, what went through wasn't unanimous, and some of the questions raised, I think, were around community consultation and how the community is currently feeling and how they feel. And I know we've sort of said, oh, well, the little ones will just take care of themselves, but often these little projects, your driveway crossovers and all those kind of things can be an issue as well. So I just wanted to highlight that. Probably just a couple of questions through the chair. On page 47, it says that if you were to run a bond process, maybe it's 147. Oh no, sorry, page 49. It said with a bond process scenario, it would require 1 FTE that would be required to support the front end and 1 for the back end. Can someone please explain, is that on the ground inspecting or is that something else?
So yeah,
Mr. McCluskey.
So through the chair, in terms of the front end type of work, that is dilapidation surveys before, during and after the work that's being undertaken is subject to bond. In terms of the back end, that's more about the handling of either cash or bank guarantees, the audit processes, everything that's involved in accounting, the council handling somebody else's money. As indeed is reflected in the report, but expect the majority of the work in handling this process will be the on the ground work.
Okay, so this is not the on the ground work.
Through the chair again, the 1.0 FTE front end is the on the ground work.
Okay.
The 0.5 FTE back end is accounting support.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, okay. I suppose just to understand, I suppose, how we've got to this bond process. Are we, I suppose this is either to the CEO or the director, are we currently under resourced to manage the amount of development going on in the city? And these?
That's hard to answer. There are a range of factors involved in managing development. There's obviously the development assessment process. That is a challenging process because right now there are strict timeframes around that. And I can tell you that our development assessment staff work very long hours to meet those deadlines and make sure that we don't have any deemed approvals and do their utmost to make sure that those assessments and evaluations are done in a professional manner. And I would say that we are, depending on the volume of development applications received at any given time, Mr. McCluskey, I'm sure will have a view on this, but we are close to the sideline in terms of resourcing and development assessment. If we have a spike in DAs, heavy activity as we did certainly in the last 12 to 18 months. I think Mr. McCluskey would agree. We probably are marginally under-resourced, I think, in relation to development assessment, but we do the best we can with what we have. Fair statement?
I think that's best.
If, of course, there is to be a dip or in development activity, then we might be more comfortable in that space. But what we're talking about also here is a range of other activities that need to be administered as part of managing development, compliance, communications, permit evaluation, monitoring, range of other things. Those areas and their resourcing depend largely upon how well behaved the developers are in any given time, and also competing priorities, because many of our staff who deal in those areas also do a range of other tasks. For example, most of you know Ms. Carter, a traffic engineer who spends a lot of time working on traffic management plans and working on those sorts of things. But equally, she's got a range of other things to deliver, like your integrated transport plan and dealing with regular customer complaints and issues and concerns around parking and other things all the time. So, you know, she's a resource that does a bit of this. Equally, permit management is an issue for our engineers who are also involved in project delivery and asset management. And our compliance staff, of course, are doing things like parking enforcement, monitoring school zones, and also normal compliance inspections on new builds and renovations and the like. So all these people do a bit of this as part of their job. If you ask me overall what our resourcing levels are, I would say they are tight, but manageable most of the time, depending on competing priorities. And there are times when we struggle to meet demand, but other times we're able to meet demand. Mr. McCluskey, would you like to add anything further to what I just said?
Well, I think there's just one thing to mention around the smaller permit side of the matter. There's kind of things that happen in our residential side streets. So in 2017, council was considering the way it wanted to resource the development compliance function and how it wanted that service level, I guess, to sit and determined to focus compliance resources on the urban corridors and not to have a proactive compliance approach in the side streets. Now, we estimated it would be 2 FTE to deliver compliance across all those functions. Council selected a focused process of having 1 FTE engaged in the arterial roads. So in terms of managing across our full suite of development compliance and the public realm interface, I think on our estimates then we're still under-resourced to be able to deliver an increased service level beyond that count.
Yeah, and look, that's very valuable feedback, I think, for council making decisions, especially at this strategic level. And I'm certainly a bit of a fan of looking at investment attraction versus that's quite separate from destination marketing. But if we're at capacity at the moment, how are we going to go forward? So just one further thing, and I know Councillor Nelson brought this up at the last discussion, is like we're having these discussions with developers and saying, doing the right thing or not. Is there a register or a, something that the community can access to say what decisions are being made and why? Because I think it's more as well for the directorates and the CEOs, protection as well as the council to say, look, when we're negotiating these things, is it a written deed or is it sort of conversations, or how is that actually recorded through the mayor?
So yeah,
This is a brand new process. We are
It's
literally
really
negotiating our very first deed right
Right.
now. I have every expectation that the deliverables in that deed will be communicated, but look, I also would expect that the developer would ask for the commercial elements of that deed to remain commercial in confidence. However, there should be a clear expectation to the community what to expect, and it will be focused on ensuring to the best extent we can, community outcomes at its core. That's why we're doing it. We're not doing this to create some sort of fast lane for development. Quite the opposite. What we're doing is trying to find some way outside of, again, inefficient and not always effective expiations to incentivize developers to do development in a manner that considers the impacts on the community. So how we communicate that is yet to be determined, but I'll take that as feedback and input into the
Yeah.
process.
But just onto that, may I suggest that the previous report did also mention that some of the things would not go ahead unless the fees were reduced to be. So there was
Yes, that's
a market.
correct. Yes.
So there is a market element in this. And just final question, is it possible to take it in parts?
I'll have it taken place.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so they're questions. Is there any further discussion on this item? If the answer is no, then I would like to head back to Councillor Nelson to sum up.
No, I think it's been somewhat well.
Okay, so we're going to take it in parts. So we'll first vote on part one of the recommendations. All those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. Part two of the recommendations. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you for that discussion and those questions. Item 2.5, Irish Heart Reserve upgrade budget on pages 52 and 59 of your agenda. Recommendations on page 53. Do I have a mover? Okay, as there's no mover, would anyone like to move any motion? Councillor Nelson.
Yeah, Mayor, I'd like to push out a motion
Certainly.
to defer the decision of this upgrade.
Until
Until a workshop can be held to discuss the project. I would suggest with previous discussions that might be around about July to discuss the potential concept and funding of the project.
so we might want to be specific about within 3 months.
Through you, Mayor, can I suggest as soon as possible? We have a packed workshop schedule. We're going to have to try and move things.
Yep.
And they're all urgent.
We'd generally like to
Yeah,
use terms
As soon as practical.
But
I don't know.
what was it? It's probably now it's discussed.
Well, it means I'll do it as soon as I can. If you have a Tuesday off, you'll kick me in the pants because you haven't had this workshop.
Yeah.
So at the moment, we have the council to this matter until a workshop can be held to discuss the project within 3 months. What are we now, April? That's sort of May, June, July.
That's going to be hard. Take it.
Well, it's possible.
We're
If
starting
you
to learn, so-
sacrifice something else, yes, take
We
it.
can say it later.
Mr. Delano?
There is an opening on the second side, and the ICP is going to be down. It's got the chance of like drainage.
There you go.
So as of today, so that
It's not a good.
As soon as practical.
Problem solved.
There are other workshops, members, that I've already had, you asked me to schedule in the next 6 weeks. We'll do it though. If this is more important, then by all means.
Councillor Nelson, would I be able to suggest that we also add item 4 on the previous recommendations, because we are definitely going to ask for an extension. So you're happy for that wording to be added as
Very happy.
a second part to your motion?
Yes.
We'll just wait to get the wording up.
Sorry, Ms. Moon?
Shaking my head with my hand.
So,
If the workshop is in May, we will not be able to consult with the community on it. So we will consult with the community, assuming that draft annual business plan goes through tonight. It will just be as it.
So if I may, part of the reason we scheduled this item before the annual business plan, members, was because if you went ahead and accepted the recommendation, or indeed made any decision that would have impacted the draft budget, that would have been consulted as part of the process. And what Ms. Moon is alluding to is the fact that obviously this will not allow that to happen. If we have a workshop in May, that still potentially gives you time to make a change to the budget prior to adoption, but that will clearly not capture consultation from the community. So we'll be relying on you, members, to essentially gauge your community's position on this outside of the consultation process. It's just a, I guess, a disclaimer, if you will.
Okay, councillor Nelson, would you like to speak to the motion?
I would, perhaps for the benefit of my fellow councillors, understand why I've put that motion forward. I believe the Irish Harp Reserve needs to go ahead. It needs to happen. It's overrun. It's dangerous. The problem with this is going $300,000 over budget. And with a recommendation to, at this stage, remove the lighting from it. The lighting is one of the most important parts. The homeless people down there at the moment, the danger with the non-lighting is a real issue. So yeah, this project must go ahead. It needs to go ahead. But I think there's some more work to do on with regards to the concept and the budgeting. And I think a solid workshop. I believe we can solve those problems and hopefully work out the funding on it.
Thank you, councillor Nelson. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Nguyen, would you like to speak to the motion?
I concur with everything, councillor Nelson said. Look, the projects, we've had 2 consultations, we've gone out, spoken to the community, but I think this huge increase is very significant, and just before I budget this amount, like I'm a little bit disappointed that it came back to us like this, and that we're supposed to make a decision. Not comfortable with that at all. So hope you support the motion and that we can take it to a workshop and further discuss this.
Thank you, councillor Nguyen. Has anybody got anything further to add that we haven't heard already? Councillor Back.
Yeah, look, I just thank the motion coming because I had lots of questions, still do. And one of the things, I guess, when a report like this comes to us and the way that it's come to us, it also suggests that we're making cuts to other capital projects in the draft budget. It doesn't talk about we could increase rates or we could cut operating projects. And this is the discussion I'd like to have, or we could look at recurrent budget as well to fund some of this stuff. So I think, if certainly with me, looking at the draft budget later, we've done that with the community present as well, and that's been in the open, and I think this is just beyond the run. So thank you very much for bringing the motion.
Thank you, councillor Back. Any further discussion? If not, councillor Nelson, would you like to sum up?
No, I think everything that needs to be said is said.
Let's put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against, carried unanimously. Thank you, members. Item 10.6, behavioural management support policy outlined on pages 60 to 74 of your agenda with a recommendation on page 60. Do I have a mover? Councillor Stanton, would you like to speak to the motion?
I might leave my comments for now, but I just wanted it up on the table.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Hollott, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, thank you. Just want to see it on the page.
Okay, do I have any discussion? Like that. Councillor Stanton, would you like to sum up? Not very much at all.
No, my reading of it, I'll sum up. My reading of it was that it's business as usual. We don't necessarily need to take further steps to I don't know to keep people in line. We seem to be a collegiate group, and I think it seems to be just business as usual. And I support the way this the motion is going.
Thank you, councillor Stanton. Let's put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against, carried unanimously. Item 10.7, tree strategy update, pages 75 to 108, your agenda with recommendations on page 75. Do I have a mover for this motion? Councillor Stanton, would you like to speak to the motion?
I will talk to this. I think this has been well presented when the director during the budget proposal talked about the trees. I think he made a very valid point that we don't necessarily need the 200 litre trees that we've always been using. If I'm correct in saying that, we have been using 200 litre ones, and this takes us down to 100 litres. I think the most useful part of this this report is the little picture that shows all the different trees, and the difference between the 100 litre tree and the 200 litre tree seems to be, not a lot. And in the end, at the end of the day, we're going to save a fair bit of money just by going down a size. And I think it's a wise move, and one that'll help fund other projects in the community.
Thank you, councillor Stanton. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Holler, would you like to speak to the motion?
I also agree that the leader is a good idea.
Thank you. Do we have any further discussion? Councillor Backer.
Discussion and a few questions. So just in regards to the data, love a bit of data. So it looks like there's been, I don't know, is an assessment being done on all our trees, or is the data just on the new ones that are intended to be planted? Question through the chair.
CEO.
Mr. Lane. But there has been a assessment on every tree planted on a public road or reserve. They're all mapped in GIS similar to the image that was shown.
Further question. Is it able to be exported as a CSV file so I can upload it to Google Maps? For the benefit of the public?
First, I have to take on notice, we're working through a forest for a specific cat. It's not an L GIS system typically. So I have to take on notice as to whether it can display at the very least. Putting a video because of the content data.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll have it offline, but I think it's really important, and certainly City of Burnside's done some excellent work in mapping all their trees. I note that the service level for other, I think it's North Pan and St Peters, so they water for 3 years as opposed to 5. So because it's a bigger tree, we have to water it for longer. So there's cost for that, and obviously the root ball doesn't take as quickly. So the smaller trees are great, but it breaks my heart. I see so many damaged young or missing young trees, especially when it's done in and around development or someone backs into it. Again, just one more question. Do we have incident reporting, or, you know, how many of these trees that we plant are still there, you know, 3 years from now? Or this system kind of cater for that?
CEO.
Mr. Dwayne. Through the chair, so start as they're going through a precinct approach to our printing, we'll update the data as they go. We will also seek funding every 5 years for independent refresh and re-audit. It's best practice and really the LGA pushing us down that path from a risk management perspective and then assessing risk and treatment as well.
Yeah, no, fantastic. So yeah, fully endorse it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Backer. Any further questions? Briefly from the chair, it's great to say that we've done some research around what other councils are doing, and we're right in the middle of what everybody else is doing. We're not as an outlier, and the director's been able to bring personal experience from other councils to play here as well. It makes good sense to nuance the decision making regarding the size of the trees based on where they're going. I do like the idea of, given that we're having a bit of a change of direction, maybe starting to monitor the success of this decision. It should be relatively simple. It's easy to say that, but it's definitely possible, because we would like in a couple of years' time to be sitting here saying we made the right decision. Let's keep making that decision, or if we haven't, let's revert back to something else. So I would encourage the director to work on how we can track and monitor the various aspects which lead to the successful outcome. But overall, that we're able to continue the planting that we want to continue with at a far lower impact and divert those funds to elsewhere in our city is a fantastic outcome. So thank you to the director for the report. If there's no further questions, I'll head back to Councillor Stanton to sum up.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's a good decision just to go down a size and divert funds elsewhere. I do hope, and I'm sure will happen, that we can keep track of if there's an increased mortality rate of trees, and maybe if it is, you know, we need to go back to the way we're doing things. But I wholeheartedly endorse this. I think it's a sensible way to go.
Thank you, Councillor Stanton. Let's put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. Item 10.8, dog registration of fees. It's outlined on pages 109 to 111 on your agenda, with recommendation on page 109. Do I have a mover? Councillor Stanton.
I will move this. I know it's very much an administrative sort of motion. Just want to do a little bit of housekeeping on this one, and I'm guessing you're probably going to guess what I'm going to say. I do note that in the chart, we have standard dog meaning microchipped and desexed, and we have non-standard dog meaning not microchipped and or not desexed. I spent about 20 years as an advertising copywriter trying to advocate for plain speak and plain language and plain English. And to my mind, the word standard dog, or the word standard, if you to look it up, means not modified, you know, sort of as it came out of the factory. And curiously, in this definition, standard means microchipped and desexed. So it's the furthest you could get from being standard, the dog's been chipped and clipped. I know that we can never get around that definition. I looked it up, and it is a definition that is used by many, many councils. So if we're locked into that definition, I would just a little bit of housekeeping. In the chart that we've got there, it's got non-standard dog, meaning not microchipped and or not desexed. But if we go up to our executive summary, standard dog, not microchipped and or desexed. So we don't say and or not desexed. So we've kind of changed the definition between our executive summary and our chart is a little bit ambiguous. It's a little bit of housekeeping, and it's just something to look forward to, you know, look to the next time we come with these. It's a horrible term. I wish we could actually get rid of the word standard and non-standard. I know that in the dog industry, the word is entire. You have an entire dog, that is a dog who's not been desexed. But seeing as we're adding microchip to the program, it kind of, I guess that kind of muddies the waters a little bit. It'd be nice if we could find another way of saying it rather than standard and non-standard, but it is the system that we're dealt with at the moment. Other than that, it's dog registration fees. What can you say? They have to go up as part of CPI. It's the way it is.
Thank you, councillor Stanton. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Hollock, would you like to speak to the motion?
Look, it's a very reasonable increase. In fact, is it smaller than the previous one? It is. It went up,
It's the same, I believe.
the same percentage, is it?
Please say.
I thought it was marginally less, but no. And that's reasonable. That's to be expected. It's always gone up every budget, hasn't it? So,
Thank you, councillor Hollock. Does anybody have anything further to add? Otherwise, I'll return back to councillor Stanton to sum up.
I think it's all been said as dog fees.
Thank you, councillor Stanton. Let's put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. Item 10.9, local government rates oversight scheme, SCOSA advice to City of Prospect. Outlined on pages 112 to 157 of the agenda with recommendation on page 113. Do I have a mover?
I'll move it and speak to it.
Councillor Backer, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, I would. So I've had the pleasure of sitting on the audit and risk committee, which is always interesting just to have that sort of, 10-year, 20-year focus. One of the things about the SCOSA report, I guess, it's trying to peg us against other councils and how we're performing, and it came back quite well, except for things like the asset management plan, because that's only out in draft for consultation at the moment. So when we're getting these reviews, a bit like the cost of things, a bit like the Irish Heart Reserve, there are still surprises to be had in the next 3 or 4 years. So until those draft asset management plans are endorsed and we start pegging our long-term financial plan to the draft asset management plans, the other thing, and I'll probably talk to that a bit later in reports to note, is the cost of stormwater. So that's going to be a major cost for us into the next 10 years. The other thing as well, just to consider, is that our current long-term financial plan doesn't really envisage any kind of extra major projects. So if we want to have another big thing in this term of council, we need to really work out how we're going to do it, and either we find other ways to raise revenue or we have to relook at our current services that we're doing. So at this point in time, I think the SCOSA sort of said that we're doing okay, but just I would highlight that until those asset management plans are back in front of us with numbers attached to them, I think we're actually still a bit in the dark of actually how well we're doing. So it's probably just food for thought, but I'd appreciate your comments or questions through the chair.
just a bit of feedback there, the draft.
Yeah, so through the mayor, the draft asset management plans and the numbers around asset management foreshadowed in those plans is included in our long-term financial plan numbers, has been now for this moon, 18 months, so almost since they arrived. We had them in there since January last year, was my understanding. And members, the reason I know that is because many of certainly the returning members sat through a very challenging budget process last year, where we had to find money to fund the shortfall anticipated by those plans. That's why we had to make those
But
savings measures
Maybe
last year.
that's my misunderstanding. My understanding was that there's some things that we have done condition reports on there.
So through the mayor, the condition assessments are being updated right now, but the asset management plans in draft were undertaken on the basis of a degree of condition assessment reports that we had done on some assets, granted not limited.
Yeah.
Mr. Delaney could probably speak to more of that, but a desktop analysis of condition evaluations on the remainder. And we all acknowledged at the time that that was not ideal, and that we did need to fund new asset management condition assessments, which you did do last year and which are being undertaken certainly as we go through, with a view to updating our asset management plans in accordance with the new framework. Mr. Delaney, can you speak to that?
Yeah, certainly, but so as it stands, the draft asset management plan won't change what we've previously seen in terms of the data that's currently in the long-term management plan. We're doing a lot of work. We're about to go to market. Expect condition assessments on our transport assets and our building assets. I think we're going to fund it both. The budget allocation that we have and some additional modelling to model what it looks like in terms of our eligibility to maintain certain services. We're engaging with the council through that journey, because obviously depending on your intervention levels, depending on the service that you want to set in buildings or otherwise, and what assets you wish to spread out, there's significant impacts to long-term plan and the strategy moving forward. So it'll be a journey, and we've started that journey, and we'll bring that along to the wider.
But to be clear again,
The draft,
asset
mine,
management
it's
plans-
probably the condition reports as more of a
indeed,
factor of that, yeah.
indeed, but
Sorry,
again, they're
I like
based on desktop
Yeah.
analysis and the best information available when those plans were prepared. So we know they're not perfect, but they're a lot better than what we had. And certainly, we're more confident in that they captured the updated unit rates as of the end of 2021-ish. And that is a big step forward from where we were. And indeed, a big step forward from, I should say, where a lot of other councils are,
I was
including
about
other
to say, the
councils,
SCOSA of the regional councils.
through the SCOSA
Yeah,
process.
no, so thank you for that clarification.
Thank you, councillor Backer. Do I have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Stanton, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, I'm good at this point, thank you.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Just very briefly from the chair, it was great to see that that whilst it identified things we already knew. So I think that hats off to Ginny and her team for placing us really well. It didn't raise any concerns, it just raised things in general that I thought we already knew about, which was really comforting to hear. Councillor DeBacker, I'm going to circle back to you to sum up.
Just encourage everyone to support the motion.
Thank you. Let's put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against, carried unanimously. Item 10.10, draft annual business plan and budget 2023-2024 on pages 158 273 of your agenda, with a recommendation on page 159. Do I have a mover for the motion? Councillor Stanton, would you like to speak to the motion?
I will move it to put it on the floor. I find it it's a report with a lot of moving parts. I can't say I understand all of them, but to me, it looks like it's going to work well.
Thank you very much. Do I have a second for the motion? Councillor Nguyen, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, please. Just regarding the consultations, I'm looking forward to the consultations, especially, you know, what the children have to say. And I think this year's the first time. Is it a public meeting? And is that the first time that we're doing that and inviting elected members to come and talk to it? Sorry, that was a question.
Ask Ms. Taylor to take that one.
Yeah, through the mayor, I'm not sure if the previous practice of actually having elected members, I think they were invited. However, this will actually be the first time we're doing a panel session. We'll be inviting elected members to sit on the panel and speak with the community at that public meeting.
Cool. So that's a different approach and something different that is, you know, that this terms council, this that we're doing. So hopefully we'll attract more people to come, and I feel that Councillor Stander has said, like, this report is really heavy, and you know, if you don't read this or you don't look at this every day, you know, to the average ratepayer, they could just, you know, if they read it, they could just miss it. So it's heavy, very heavy stuff. But I look forward to reading the feedback and the comments from the consultations. But I want to congratulate Ginny and her team, because it's a very detailed and a lot of work has gone into it.
Thank you, Councillor Nguyen. Do I have any further discussion on the motion? Councillor Backer.
Yeah, just a question in regards to the communications, what's actually going out to the public, as far as probably a question to the chair, to the director. I know we've gone out with the kind of, what do you call it, a sort of metric map with a little, you know, rate in the dollar or whatever it is. But I guess we've done a lot of work in regards to the McGregor Tan. So things that are of importance that, you know, we're doing well, or we could spend more money on, or things that actually aren't of importance, and we're doing maybe over egging it a little bit. And one of the things that was a standout in the McGregor Tan was around parking. And I'm just really interested to see if in the comms we'll be tying the McGregor Tan to what we're actually delivering with the services. Just through the
Question
to
to the director.
Before I do flick that to the director, I will say that I think what we're getting closer to now is where our community strategic planning efforts should be, rather than our annual business plan. The annual business plan really does generally drive from our community strategic plan.
Yeah.
And of course, the community strategic plan doesn't right now anticipate as a primary principle addressing parking as an issue. It of course references parking, but not as a primary principle. And I think that's probably where you'd be going. Now, in relation to the degree to which we could potentially incorporate learnings from the McGregor Tan work into our consultation, Ms. Taylor, could you take that one?
Certainly can. Through the mayor, we've tried to make that link back to, as if you look on page 273, in the second paragraph, you'll actually see that we have tried to make that link back to some of those priorities to sort of like, I guess it's the old, you said we listened kind of approach. So, and certainly our approach with the communications is not only telling the story about here's all bright and shiny great things of the building, but here's actually the ongoing maintenance for the 81% of the value that you put on open spaces. So it's also, I guess, really highlighting and telling the story around the ongoing maintenance and services and service levels that we continue to provide for those really valuable spaces that the community have highlighted.
So just a quick question. So the finances is that the size that it's going out in the communication?
It's just the draft.
Oh, okay, all right. Yeah,
and I just wanted to promote, sorry, through the mayor. It's just the draft, and it's just the that's why it's watermark draft. It's just, I guess, an option and a highlight. I just wanted to demonstrate something that we might do. It's not exact. It's pretty much just a prototype, but it's a bit of an idea of what we're going to try with.
And look, I mean, I think that's great, because that's sort of Instagrammable communication. So because I think we had gone icon based, but again, if it's not engaging, people won't come. So I think, you know, it's great to have, you know, this is what we're doing, this is what it costs, this is what we're doing, this is the value it means to the community. So yeah, so I'm very encouraging of that direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Backer. Any further discussion? That being the case, I will send it back to Councillor Stander to sum up.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm glad this is the beginning of the process, and this to go out to the community. It is always hard to get the community at a very basic level to understand how their money is spent. I had a resident talk to me about how his rates were going to rise, and it's going to be because of this and that and the other. And I said, well, you know, a lot of it might be electricity this year. He goes, oh, what do we spend electricity on? I said, well, the street lighting for a start. He goes, no, we don't pay for that. You know, that just magically comes on. So it's hard sometimes to get the the residents to understand where their money goes. And I was just looking at one of the pages in the report that has budget highlights, and it's got this much for the local road resealing and this much for the footpaths and this much for curbs and gutters. And for elected members to be talking to the residents, it's nice to have that little mud map that we can say, this is where your money is going. I mean, like myself, I don't understand a fair bit of the report because I don't understand the financials. It's not my wheelhouse. I rely on the director and the people who are a lot smarter than me to get that right. But this little part of it, where the money goes, where are your rates going? That bit's useful to me. I can then pass that on to residents, and they can understand why, where exactly their money goes. It's a great report. It's got all the depth that we need. It's got the overall, the overarching things that we can head out to residents. I look forward to the feedback from the community.
Thank you, councillor Stannon. Let's put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against, carried unanimously. Thank you, everybody. Item 11 on the agenda, general business of an urgent nature. So you don't have anything urgent? Nope. Okay, so item number 12, reports for information. Information reports can be resolved on block. Would anyone like to pull out item 12.1? Anyone like to pull out item 12.2? In that case, we're voting no mover seconder. Sorry, we need a mover and a second that way. For both at the same time. Do I have a mover? Councillor Sam, I'll speak to the motion.
Not on block, I don't think.
No, it's true. Well done. Just testing you out there. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Nelson. No discussion. All those in favour? Against, carried unanimously. Moving right along. Council member reports and briefings. Are there any council member reports and briefings? Councillor Nelson.
Usual, just mentioned I went to attended the local government gala night last Thursday, which was good. Again, catching up with mainly the regional mayors and councillors, which was great. And also the local government association ordinary meeting last Friday, which was very informative.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Any further council member reports and or briefings?
I
Councillor
better
Baker.
because it's minuted. So I also attended the local government association, just the OGM, and it was, and they had a very interesting environmental focus, and I think that'll come back. For us.
Thank you very much, Councillor Baker. Any further reports and or briefings? Okay, let's move on to item 14, motions on notice, there are nil. Questions with notice, there are nil. Confidential items, nil. Meeting closed at 8:30.
Oh, look at that.
Especially with you.
I would, congratulations.
We have cheese and biscuits and drinks.